So this is Philosophy of Music. We're recording with Professor Pushpesh Pant. He is a professor of mine at law school. Uh, I know that he used to teach in JNU and he taught international affairs and a bunch of things, but he has a thing for food. And when I discussed with him that I'm doing this podcast on philosophy of music, he told me that I'm writing a book on food and music. So, sir, can you just first elaborate why you are, what your inclination is towards food and how it led to food and music?
Tanmay, that's a rather interesting question. But I think the question begs itself because I think there are two basic drives in human kind, which is sex and food, which are common to everybody. And I think sex is essential for the procreation of the species, and for the individual, food takes priority. So you have food before you are born because a pregnant mother is given special foods for the child. The child gets up and starts crying for the milk, and when he's weaned from milk to grains, that's a very important ritual, annaprashan, things of that kind. You live your life and you die, and the food doesn't leave you even after that. There is that nice line from Upanishad which says, Nacha vittena tarpaniyo manushya. The man is not delivered by money, so there has to be a pind. There has to be a pind made of cereal, grains. So I think food doesn't leave you before birth, after death. And then the ancients said that, I don't wish to sound like a Hindu revivalist, these are bad, difficult, turbulent times. But the Vedic Richas say, Annam ve Brahma, Annam ve Rasa. An is food, is the cosmic reality. And food is out of which everything comes into existence, the body, memory, etc. And it also is ras. That is, I think, the more important part of it. And that's what the connection between food and I think all art forms, more so music, comes in. Ras is the sap of something. And ras is also the enjoyment of aesthetic enjoyment. If you go to the classic text, seminal text on Indian aesthetics, Bharat Muni's Natya Shastras, it talks of rasa. It talks of rasa in terms of vibhava anubhava sanchari sanyogad rash nishpatti. So you have a steady state of your emotion, your natural inclination, and you have a temporary sense perception and change in moods. And then there's a blend of what is transitory and what is more permanent. And then you come into a state of mind which may be joyous, which may be depressing, which may be whatever, and he classifies them into different, the erotic, the heroic, the wrathful, and so on. But the point is that I think there is this connection between what is essential to food, the sattva, which is not the simple food, which is the essence of food, and the ras of food, which I think takes you to naturally to the realm of food. And it is in my case, the obsession started where I started early in my adolescence with the word taste. So, you said, oh, he has a very good taste in music. He has bad taste in music. He has good taste in clothes and so on, and good taste in painting, good taste in poetry, literature. And then there is taste in food. So either you have good taste or bad taste is your concern, but there is taste in food. So the issue of taste and the issue of taste in music sort of hooked me very early in life.
And so, what is the connection as an art form? Adhiraj, if you want to chime in, have you ever felt that all art forms do have an interrelation?
There is Lord Acton's famous quote: "All art aspires to the condition of music." So there is a degree of abstraction, there is a degree of transience, there is a degree of the music of spheres, which people like Newton would talk about it. There would be, you would talk of lay and pralay. I recall the reading in my late adolescence, Christopher Caldwell, that Marxist who died in fighting the Spanish Civil War, who talked in terms of a rhythm which the human body keeps, the pulse, the heartbeat, and your life is set to a beat. So it may be a harmonic music, it may be melodic music, it may be different tones combining, notes combining, but you would have a very obvious connection to all art forms in music. You would have performing arts, which are closer to music, but you have plastic arts, you have a sculpture which will remain, which will be tangible heritage. But I think what is interesting about food and music and commonality and affinity is the intangibility, the transience. So you have it on your tip of your tongue, you taste it, and then the taste may linger on for a few moments more. It's like sex again. You go to that. You have foreplay and you have afterglow. But you experience ecstasy or maybe agony for a moment, and then all that remains is a trace of memory. So what you ate. So if you see that Marcel Proust researches Lutam Perdu, the researches on that remembrance of things past. So this man is remembering something which he ate, which was given to him by his mother when he was being taken around as a sickly kid in a perambulator, and that memory of food consumed when he was very young is the lifetime's obsession for him. So I do think that food has this great relationship with music because of its transience.
But so that line that all art forms
Aspire.
aspire towards a condition of music. It, I read about it. You have told me about this in an earlier conversation as well. And someone, I don't remember, somebody had a commentary that what it means is that the form and subject matter of music is the same, whereas in other most art forms,
No,
forms and subject matter
I
is
do think you
slightly
could
different.
simplify it, Tanmay, as simply form and content takes us into another realm of philosophical discussion. So if you go to Kenneth Burke, if you go to the Western aestheticians, you go to Susan Langer, the dynamic body on the stage. So either you are describing a relationship of mass with space, which is dance, the moving body, the moving image. You have form in painting, which where you would have line and shape and color and again a relationship with the space, but which would be static. The problem is that in dance and music and in food, the relationship would not be static. You would not be defining a form which would stay there for a while, you know. And then of course you can say you can set fire to a painting, you can vandalize a painting, you can wreck a building. So, but even the glorious monument, the wreckage of the monument, would give you some idea of the scale. Take Konark, for instance, or take the Athenian ruins, or take the amphitheaters in Rome and things of that kind. So even a ruin of a majestic architecture would have something tangible, concrete. The rubble would tell you the scale. But in music, you know, it is just there. And I think the line between form and content blurs in music more than in any other art form, because what you are experiencing through your oral nerves is a sound, and the sound is what is coloring, so to speak, to mix metaphors, your mind into a particular mood. So if you are listening to a symphony, or if you are listening to a sonata, for instance, Moonlight Sonata, for instance, which has been copied very many times in Indian film music, or you talk in terms of a martial march, so it would evoke a certain battle drums are sounding, you know. So the point is there is something primeval about sound and what it does to you. And sound as noise and sound as music are two different, you know, but it is sort of somebody arranging uh, anarchic sound into sonorous music, you know, and then you'd have music of the bird singing, which you're not worried about the cuckoo or the nightingale, and you would not say this is the form, this is the frequency. You don't analyze it that way at all. So in all great art, I think form and content merge into one another. But in music, the degree of abstraction and transience is, I think, what sets it apart.
If you look at it as an evolutionary thing, food and music show how cultures tend to mix into each other because they mix into each other very similarly.
No, no. You know, you'll hate for me for nitpicking like this, but we use the word evolution again very, very simplistically. We think there's a Darwinian evolution and everything evolves in a straight line, sort of. No, it doesn't happen that way. There are mutations. There is a struggle for existence, as Darwin's famous phrase has it, for the existence and the survival of the fittest. But that talks in terms of a species and a natural environment as a context. You have mutations which are accidental. I mean, if you have the molecular biologist like Jacques Monod, whose biography is titled Chance and Necessity. So if you do not believe in the late Victorian progressive historical line, and you have a philosophy which is, say, the post-quantum physics one, which is existential, which means that the life has no meaning except what you want to give it, and you don't believe in Big Bang or the steady state or whatever it is, then we are not even a insignificant speck in the cosmic design, so it doesn't really make a difference. So what happens is that you choose to have an order which you prefer rather than to anarchy, and music seems to head that way. Now, but there is in food also. So you go back to let's say the cave paintings of Bhimbetka 15,000 years ago, and you have those sketches which describe a path to a hunt, which may be a route to a map, which may be a guide to the next person to go and spoil the honeycomb somewhere. So the point is that, does the painting on the wall tell you a story? Is it a primitive language, or is it just coding for finding food? So if you are a hunter-gatherer, you are eating ripened fruit, you are eating seeds, you are eating whatever comes your way. So does food evolve from that consciously in a straight line, where you suddenly make a discovery of fire and have roasts and grills, and then you jump say 10,000, 12,000 years and come to Indus Valley civilization, where you have traces of clay ovens like tandoors, and you have the great greenery, and you have the rice grain and wheat, and you have animal bones. But can you trace a straight line of evolution from hunting, gathering to taming and cooking? And so there is an anthropology and social anthropology of food, and there is a cultural anthropology of people like Golden Bough, John Fraser, who sort of talk of these things. I don't think that you say that is similar in music and similar in this. So you have chants undertaken, cries of pain, ecstasies of joy, exclamations of joy, and then they become part of some kind of primitive music. Then you have music as ritual, and you have music as chants. So you might have chants of Vedic chants, you might have chants of Buddhism, you might have chants, other religious culture, and then you have church music. And then can you sort of see that this is a linear progression of music evolving? So I don't think that human civilization or any cultural form has a straight course of evolution. So there are mutations, there are sudden shifts in what you thought was evolution, and there are man-made interventions. You might have Mendeleev trying to practice in his monastic ashram and breeding peas of different colors and things of that kind. Or you might have cross-fertilization taking place accidentally in crops. So I don't think that evolution follows that way. So unless you believe in intelligent design and a great clockwork and the God looking after everything up there and he is not playing dice, I don't believe in that at all.
In my mind, it was a simpler parallel. So if two civilizations would meet, the harmonium, it's not an Indian instrument. We took it, we sort of
Again, the word meet is odd. I mean, I would much rather say encounter. When two civilizations or cultures encounter each other, you might have a situation which a good friend would say, Huntington would say, clash of civilizations. It may not be necessarily, you take a harmonium which comes with missionaries and becomes a keyboard and a band baja for evangelizing Christian missionary cult, and it becomes Ram Leela, then it becomes Bhajan Mandali, then it becomes this. But there were bhajans before harmonium came into existence. There was before the English missionaries gave us the dictionaries, the Dutch to be precise, or the printing press, before we did something, The Hindu culture, or Indic culture, if you prefer to call it this way in more civilized secular times. So if you had a culture surviving and flourishing, if I may say so, without the harmonium, proselytizing all over the country, the Brahmanic way, mode of life from north to south, actually it is again a very insignificant thing, which I would I would not say cosmic, but even in the millennial scale, I would think it doesn't make a difference to me.
But adoption of such habits, like two civilizations adopt habits of food from each other.
No. See, again, I think, what is happening is that you are tempted to generalize because of trying to establish a relationship between music and food. There is a very intense, close, inextricably entwined relationship between music and food, but it's not necessarily civilizationally a harmonious confluence all the time. You might have a civilization where the ruling elite has access to exotic, expensive foods from elsewhere. Let's take a concrete example: the Columbian Exchange in the 16th century India. The Portuguese, we are told, brought with them the tomatoes, the potatoes, the tea, the tobacco, the addictions, and chilies. But if you look at it a little more seriously, there was a chili in the Indian subcontinent, on the Indian subcontinent, before the Portuguese brought it. The Bhut Jolakia had not transported between 15th century, 16th century to beyond the Black Hills of Bhutan and so on and so forth. You have tea growing wild there. You go to Gwalior and you go to this museum which we have talked about before, the Gujari Rani Ka Mahal, where there is a museum at the foot of the Gwalior fort, and there is a sculpture dating back to 7th century which shows a man eating something which is maize, is a corn cob. So, and playing something like a sarod. Now, which, if one believes Ustad Amjad Ali Khan Sahab, the rabab was brought by his great-grandfathers to Gwalior, and they have the sarod khar. With all due respects to the great line of musicians in sarod and Amjad Ali Khan Sahab's line, I think that there was something like this instrument, which probably was not called sarod, but was there before. So I do greatly believe that Indian subcontinent, the undivided Indian subcontinent, and look, when I talk of music and food, let me make an admission very clear. My confession is that I'm talking about Indian food and Indian music. I have no knowledge of Western classical music, or I have in my youth gone through the regular rounds of Beatles to hard metal, hard rock to metal to whatever it is. But right now, I think what fascinates me and obsesses me is Indian music, classical and folk, and Karnataka and Hindustan Khayal Gayaki and Dhrupad and Thumri and Dadra and things of that kind, and foods which, shall we say, roughly correspond to these forms. So you have a classical performance, let's say, of Darbari Kannada, and you have maybe a Dhrupad Alap, and what would be the food that would come to your mind? It would be a food which is grand, a food which is stately, and that is what I was, before I got digressed, I was about to convey to you, that in a civilization there is a ruling elite which has access to expensive exotic foods, which has leisure to spend time on food and resources to have a grand meal, a grand banquet. So the emperor's table, to borrow the title of Salma Hussein's recent book, would be something like that. There's another book in the Western tradition called the Shalman's table. So you have the emperors and the elite eating food which is not what I would call civilizationally shared by everybody. So the plebeians are not eating it, the proletarians are not eating it, to use the Marxist phrase. So they are living on, you have this Kitabul Hind by Al-Baruni, and which says the staple food of India is khichdi, and it's a porridge like khichdi. And he wrote this in, I think, about 1,000 years back, 1,100 years back. He came with Mahmud Ghazni, and that's the way he describes the Indians had just khichdi. And this khichdi porridge goes back another 1,000 years back, goes to a Vedic reference where it is referred to as the kshirika. So you have khichdi, which is what the average person had, a porridge like mishmash of rice and lentils, and that's what was the staple fare. So it did not evolve into a pulao. Pulao was something different. Khichdi did not evolve into a biryani. So was it a pilaf from Central Asia which came through the Silk Route, became a pulav here? No, not quite that. Because if you go to a text like Bhava Prakash Nighantu, dating back to 4th century AD, it mentions palav, a dish which is made with condiments, rice and meat. Now, you could argue further and say even the Aryans came from Central Asia, and so it was a Central Asian pulav which came. But in that case, all of us came from Africa, one day or the other, no? So 10,000 years ago, the millets came from there, the coconuts came from the Pacific Islands. And so let's not worry about who are the sui generis sons and daughters of this soil. But let's talk in terms of a space. So this space is the Indian subcontinent, undivided from the Darya Khyber to jungles of Arakan, from Himalayan foothills to the oceans. And oceans not necessarily the Indian Ocean. It could be the Bay of Bengal, it could be the Kambat, it could be the Arabian Sea. When you reach the sea, you reached Asamudra Paryantam. And then you had zones of food decided on geography, whether you were in arid land, you grew only millets like in Rajasthan or northern Gujarat, or you were rice eating belt in Kaveri Delta or Godavari Delta, or you were wheat eaters, and not wheat eaters all. You know, you burnt forests, went from west to east, and then cultivated land, and then you were fortunate to have Doab, the delta of Ganga and Jamna, or you had the Brahmaputra Valley or the Barak Valley, and you had the Punjab, the Saptanad or the Panchanad. So you had agricultural produce, you had microclimatic region, you have people eating what was seasonally and regionally available, and food evolved out of that. So food evolved out of that as a ritual, so did music. So instead of praising gods, you started amusing yourself. And so it became, but it's very interesting. I was listening, as luck would have it, yesterday, D.V. Paluskar singing Rag Vasant. And his Rag Vasant is Shankar Pinakadhar. He's singing Rag Vasant not in a Shringar romantic mood, but in a devotional mood. And that is the typical of Drupad. But you go back to Amir Khan Saab singing Rag Vasant, or even great Kishori Amonkar, you would have Koelia Bole Ambua Ki Dar, or Piya Nahi Aaye variety, So the shades of emotions which you play around with in the same rag, melodic structure, would depend on what the person's mood was, who was doing it. And so it is with food. The other thing which led me to food, once you set me going on this, I don't stop talking, was the word aphrodisiac. When my father used to ask my mother that my mother was a polyglot, and she would say that, look, this food is supposed to be aphrodisiac. And I would say, what is aphrodisiac? And my father would say, well, you're much too young who is a doctor, to find out now. But then he would relent and say that it is something which increases your sexual desire or prowess. Years later, you read Macbeth and Shakespeare, and there's the Porter scene where it says, alcohol arouses the desire but taketh away the performance. So, then you suddenly think in terms of relationship between sex and food, and also sex and food and the right context where either sex, if you are thinking of something unmentionables in polite company, and the lady burps and farts, and the mood will not be right as would be for, soft nothings and chocolates and candlelight dinner and maybe popping the question with a diamond ring and things of that kind. One thing can lead to another in that context. So there is an ambience, and the music creates an ambience, and for appreciation requires ambience. Good food, again, you would say similarities, has this affinity, I would say, that good food requires a proper ambience, and a good food also requires a person who has a cultivated palate. So you have phrases in all languages, a jaded palate, So you tickle the sweet tooth. You have a pungent sour face. So, the words, the adjectives which define food, sweetness, sourness, pungency, astringency, bitterness, saltiness, go back to describe a personality type and character. And you have the personality type which reflects a perpetual mood. And that mood is what the raga originally means, ranjayati iti raga. What colors your mind into a particular hue is a rag. Now that is what is, I think, keeps me hooked to food and music all the time.
Adhiraj wanted to chime in.
Yes.
So it's fascinating, everything that you've said, because the background that I come from is a very Western music background, and it's not as academically studied as yours is. But there were 2 or 3 things I wanted to say. Is that no matter what the culture, I would find that if there were convergent points or divergent points between food and music, they would have to do with 3 things primarily. One would be the appreciation of, the second would be the effect of, and the third would be the consumption of.
Absolutely.
And just like you said, they don't necessarily always come together in the most friendly fashion. The second thing I found very interesting was that you mentioned the ruling elite and the access to food, and how different their food would be from the non-ruling,
the ruled.
Yeah, the ruled. And that would be the same for music as well, because the music that would be played or commissioned by the court would be very different from the music that would be sort of sung in taverns, or sort of yelled down the streets in terms of stories and folk tales and things like that, right?
No, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting point, actually. Adhiraj, what happens is that the relationship between the folk and the classical,
Yeah.
the courtly and the popular,
Yeah.
is a very complex one. Because when does the folk get converted into classical?
That's the one that's interesting.
What is the classical one?
Yeah.
Take, for instance, a Thumri Pahadi, Yaad Kiya Kiya Hai,
Yeah.
which is basically folk from Punjab, present-day Himachal Pradesh.
Yeah.
And when Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab sings it, is classical.
It turns into
It
it,
turns
yeah.
into classical.
Yeah.
Now, similarly, you have Chaiti, Kajri, Savan, Jhule,
Yeah.
Thumri Purvi Ang mostly,
Yeah.
which the dividing line between that and, say, Rag Khamaj,
Right.
or Rag Kafi, or Rag Pilu would be very, very different,
Yeah, yeah.
And you wouldn't say that there is. I mean, what you mentioned again goes back to the European context, where you would say what the people sang to amuse themselves in taverns.
Right.
But if you take the map of Europe, European Union is in a bad shape at the moment.
Yeah.
But let's say 4 centuries, 5 centuries ago, Europe still was a territory of shared cultural context.
Yes.
So the gifted musician would be going from one court, like a gifted scientist or a
Right.
painter or a sculptor, from one court to another court in quest of patronage.
Yeah.
And the court would have a circle of courtiers
Yes.
who would be people of refined taste,
Right, right.
sharing certain affinities.
Right.
But people would again be breaking what was happening.
Yes.
So when Bach gets into his fugues,
Yes.
or Beethoven gets into his symphonies,
Yes.
or Brahms gets into. So the dividing line between popular church music getting into a symphonic mode,
Yeah.
and symphonic mode taking, I mean, again, take from the operatic structure of singing
Right.
and the instrumental
Right.
to concerts in chamber music,
Yeah.
to more grand
To more-
things.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, actually, if you think in terms of, you must have just seen this adieu which Zubin Mehta did to the Philharmonic in
Yes,
Tel Aviv.
yes, yes.
Now, 50 years conducting music there,
Yeah.
and he had the nerves to play Wagner there.
Yeah, yeah.
And somebody yelled at him,
Yeah.
that was mentioned. And he carried this Philharmonic to Srinagar at the
Right.
height of the crisis there.
Right.
So I do think that music has a universal claim, so we don't
Right.
divide it into Western and Eastern.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
would
yeah.
move you. So
Yeah.
there would be a basic tune, so to
Yeah,
speak,
yeah.
which would be common. Musse na itna tu pyar jita, which is a straight lift
Yeah.
from,
We found the basic rhythm, the universal
So
rhythm. and it's
that's what Christopher Caldwell talks about. The
Yeah,
basic
yeah.
rhythm is the body's rhythm.
Yeah, yeah.
Is a circadian rhythm. There's a circadian cycle. There's a heartbeat. There's a
And-
pulsation,
yeah.
and there is. So we don't quibble with that.
No.
But I think even more fundamental is that there is an anarchic noise.
Yeah.
And to make sense out of noise, you impose on it an order, and music is the best form of order
Yeah,
which
yeah,
comes.
yeah.
So if to my mind, the musical users of music in prehistoric times were to make mnemonics easy. You remembered a mantra easily if it was
Right.
said to a chant, and you
Yes,
sang it,
and you sang it,
X
yeah.
number of time, and
Yeah.
if you insisted, you listen to these recitals in Banaras or in Pune, the Brahmins still keep mark time,
Yes.
like as if almost a conductor is
Yes,
doing
it's
it with the
almost like
baton.
that, yeah.
So you
Very much
mark
so.
syllables and you recite it like that. So I do strongly feel that what you are saying
Yeah.
is very, very important.
Yeah.
There is a universality of the musical appeal.
Right.
But again, it's difficult to imagine that Chinese opera would strike a note in the heart of a man in the Hindi heartland who's
Yeah.
singing to Chaiti on Kajri.
Right.
But there would be a overlap, so to speak. Let's say, I was discussing with Tanmay as we were driving up to this place. I was reading this book on Tamil history, and this man says that there was a time in the 17th century when a Telugu speaking person would write a verse in Sanskrit, which would be sung by a Tamil speaker, Tyagaraja Narayana Swami,
Yeah,
Muthuswami Dikshitara, and so on. And he makes a very interesting comparison that during the period of Nayakars in Tanjavur,
Yeah.
in this time, sculpture was changing, literature was changing.
Right.
He doesn't mention food, but food was also was
Yeah,
changing.
yeah.
The sambar came into existence
Yeah.
then. And we in North try to see everything coming into a synthesis with the Mughal times. We don't go back earlier
We
than
don't go
that.
back before
And
that.
if we look at the Indian subcontinent in totality and look at time spans which we have not been
Which are just dark for us.
dark
actually.
for
Yeah,
us,
Yeah.
you suddenly remember that it was a golden age in
It was-
Krishnadev Raya's
Yeah.
period, which was great in Bahmani Sultanate. It was a
Yeah.
Kuli Qutub Shah, was a great musician, so
Yeah.
to speak, I mean, who had this great affair with Bhanumati. So I was wondering is that there is something which is which appeals to the people who belong to a space and have lived in a time and have a shared heritage. So if you may disregard the Dravidians may say that we have nothing to do with the North Indian barbarians who came and colonized us. But even the arch leader would call his name would be Karunanidhi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his wife's name would be Dayalu Amma.
Yeah.
So you would have Bharatanatyam would be their inheritance, which would be going back into the play of Krishna.
Yeah.
And you even go to the Sangam poetry of the Aham and Puram period, and you again have references to Krishna, Battle of Mahabharat, or Ramayana, things of that kind. So the accent might change, but I would say that there would be still some differences that you may find a fast-paced music like Zairua music way back in 70s. That was the African version of pop or indie pop.
Yeah.
But there would be, to my mind, a passing phase. It would not be...
Yeah, we don't see much of it today.
You won't see much.
Yeah.
But while the Western classical, as you said, would have a lasting appeal, because it would have chiseled itself from a folksy roots to something of more durable structure, enduring, and people would interpret it in... The interesting thing about the Western Indian music would be that, you see, you would have written music in West, and you would have a conductor interpreting that music, and you would have an ensemble which would be, say, 100 strong.
Yeah,
But here it might be a person singing a Drupad Alap, he and his voice,
Which has
nothing
been
else.
handed down by a vocal,
19,
and
20
oral
years.
tradition. Yeah.
Generations.
Yeah.